quick demo of this video. With this Flutter beginners tutorial, we are going to demonstrate SQLite CRUD operations including design and validation of Flutter form for the insert and update operation. Just below the form, we have a ListView widget to list all of the records from our SQLite DB. We have created this app from scratch with in-depth explanation. I'm sure you will learn a lot from this tutorial for your upcoming Flutter projects. So please watch till the end of this video tutorial. Hi all, welcome to CodAffection. Today we are going to implement SQLite CRUD operations in Flutter app. Before getting into this topic, I would like to thank for your PayPal donations for my previous works. In order to make more helpful and quality tutorials like this, you can also support me through PayPal donation. I have given the link in video description and inside the first comment of the video. Without further ado, let's get started with this topic. I have already written an article on this same topic. I have given the link in video description. You can grab code from there as well. So first of all, let's create the app inside this project folder here. For that, we have to open command prompt from this same folder directory. So you can use this shortcut inside this folder path here. Just type cmd so that this command prompt will be opened from the same folder directory project here. Flutter, create the name of the app. It will be SQLite CRUD. Hit enter. So here we have successfully created the app. As a result of that, you can see this new folder with the app name SQLite CRUD. Now let's navigate inside the folder using cd command here. To open this folder inside VS Code editor, you can do this code space period or dot symbol. Hit enter. So here we have the brand new Flutter app. Now let's open this default application inside an Android emulator. For that, inside VS Code editor, you could see this option here, no device. Click on it. Then it will list all of the emulator that you have created on your Android Studio. Now select one of them. It may take a while to start the emulator. So here is the Android emulator. Now let's run this Flutter app inside this Android emulator here. For that, I have installed the extension Flutter. As a dependency, this extension Dart will be installed. Once you install those two extensions, in order to start a Flutter app, you just need to use the shortcut F5. Press F5, then select Dart and Flutter environment. As you know, for the first time, it may take a while to start the application. So finally, we have started the app inside the Android emulator here. Now let's start customizing this app as per our requirement. In order to demonstrate the SQLite CRUD operations, we are going to deal with contact informations of a person. So first of all, inside this application, we are going to create a model class for contact that we can do inside this folder here. So let's create the folder models. Inside that, let's create the file contact.dart. Now let's define the class for contact model. Class contact. Now let's add properties for the model. First of all, here we have the ID or the primary key for this contact. And then we have name and mobile number. Now let's define a constructor for this class here. So here is the constructor contact. For this constructor, we can pass values through name parameter. So this dot ID, this dot name, this dot mobile. Here we have a complete constructor for this class contact here. Since all of these parameters are named parameters, they are optional parameters for calling this constructor here. When we pass values for named parameter, we have to specify the name of the parameter also. For example, let's create an instance of contact model here. Var x is equal to contact. Hence, inside this x, we have created an instance of contact model. We have called this constructor without any parameter. We can do that since all of these parameters are optional. When we pass values to these parameters, we have to do that like this. ID is equal to something 0, then name, x, y, z, like that. So when we do this, meaning when we call the constructor with parameter values, these parameters inside the class will be initialized with the passed value. Since we have this keyword, this before the parameter, it will initialize the corresponding property inside the class. So this is a shorthand to initialize the property through constructor. I have explained this basic concept for those who are getting started with Flutter or Dart. First of all, we are going to design a form with validation and containing field values will be inserted into widget state object. And with ListView, we will list all of the inserted records from top to bottom. After that, we will implement the SQLite DB CRUD operations. So if you want to skip the design part of this application, you can go to the tab that I have specified here. So let's start designing the form. So back to the main Dart file here. As you can see here, we have the starting main function which attaches the widget my app to the screen. And here we have the home screen which is implemented with this stateful widget my home page. First of all, let me change this title here, SQLite CRUD. Now let's pass the same for this title here. Okay. Basically, I don't want to waste your time with my in-depth explanation. Even though if you are confused with these two titles here, one is inside the material app parameter title and one is here inside the my home page widget. So this parameter is passed to this widget constructor here, which is shown inside the app bar. You could see the same inside the app bar here. And the title here inside this property of material app is shown by your mobile operating system in different places. For example, it should have shown inside the collection of minimized app to recognize the application, or it might be shown inside the task manager. It depends on your operating system. Now let me change the primary color here. Currently it is blue, that's why you can see this blue color here. Now I want to use a custom color. We can't pass custom color with this primary swatch parameter. For that we have to use primary color. Now let me define the custom color at the top, dark blue color. Now let me pass the same color into this theme primary color here. You could see the same inside this app bar here. Now let's start customizing this my home page widget. So here we are inside the scaffold of the widget. Now first of all, let's change the background color. Background color is equal to colors.gray and we have to use the shade of 200. Now I want to center this app bar text here. For that we can enclose this text widget with center widget. So select the text, then from VS Code shortcut you can use this. Hold Control, then press period or dot symbol, then select this option wrap with widget. Widget name will be center. Inside this app bar I want to use white as a background color. So let's do that here. Background color is equal to colors.white, and we want to apply the text color with the custom color. So we can do that with this style property here. Style is equal to text style. Inside that, color is equal to dark blue color. You could see the change here inside the app bar. Let me remove these unwanted comments here. So basically inside body, all of the widgets are enclosed with this center widget here. Currently inside the body, we have two text widget and one floating action button. So let me remove that here. First of all, here we have the floating action button, and then let's remove these two text widget here. Currently our app looks clean. Now let's define two private functions for designing the form and the ListView widget. First of all, here we have the first function for designing the form. We need one more function for ListView widget underscore list. Now let's pass these functions inside this children's array here, form and then list. First of all, let's design the form. For that, I will start with a container here. So container, I will set the color as white. So colors.white. So every sub widget inside this container should have the background white. And then we have to add the padding, add insets, dot symmetric function can be called so that we can apply same margin vertically and horizontally. Vertically 15 and then horizontal with 30. And here we have the child for this container where we have to design the form. For this form widget, we have to pass this key parameter here. For that, I will define a state property inside the widget here. Underscore form key is equal to global key of the type form state. So by calling this global key function, we can initialize this property with a unique key value. Now we just need to pass this value into this form key parameter here, form key. So this key parameter is used to identify the widget form inside the widget tree of the application internally. Also, in order to refer this form widget outside, we can make use of this form key. Now here we have to pass this child parameter here. So we can do that with this column widget. So basically with this column widget, widgets inside this column will be aligned from top to bottom. Now inside this column widget, we have to pass an array of widgets. So basically we need two text fields for name and mobile number. So let's add that here, text form field. Now let's check how it looks like. So here we have an error. Type of something map is not a subtype of widget. I hope it should be because of this empty function list here. If you are new to Dart, let me explain this shorthand syntax here. So if you want to define a function ABC, you can do it like this. And here we can have the usual pair of curly braces like this. We can define parameters inside this pair of parentheses here. So this is a valid function in most of the language. We can use this short syntax here when the function returns a value. For example, this function returns a value 5. You can use the short syntax like this. We don't need this pair of curly braces. Instead of that, we can use this arrow here. At the end, we have to provide this semicolon. Now let's fix the error. From this list function, we have to return a widget because this list of widget expect a widget from this function here. For now, let's return a container widget here. We can modify that later. Now back to the application. Boom. So here we have the form that we have defined inside this function form. Inside that we have two text fields for name and mobile. Inside these text fields, the active border color is from the custom color that we have applied inside the primary color of the theme. Here we are showing this widget in center. Instead of that, I want to show that at the top. For that, we can change this main axis alignment here. Instead of center, replace the start with start. And now let's continue with the form design here. First of all, I want to show the placeholder for this text field. So decoration is equal to input decoration. Inside that, we can set this label text, which is equal to full name. Now let me copy this and let's paste that inside this mobile text field here instead of full name mobile. Now along with these text fields here, let's add a submit button. For that, after these two text form fields, I'm gonna add a container. I will set the margin here. We are going to apply the margin from all sides. So we can call this all function here. Now into this container, we can pass the child, which is the actual raised button. So raised button. For now, this on pressed event is null. Inside this raised button, we can have this child and where we can pass this text submit. Color is equal to dark blue color, which is the background color. And after that, we can set the text color, colors dot white. Currently, this raise button looks like a disabled button because of this null on press event here. Now let's wire up an empty function here. So this is how the button looks like. We can implement the form validation in a bit. Before that, let's wire up a function into this submit button here. So here's the function on submit. And now let's call this function inside the on press event here. on submit. Before continuing with this function, first of all, let me define a state object for the model. So here it is, contact underscore contact, and here we are calling the constructor contact. We are not passing value for any of the parameter for the constructor. So properties inside this contact object will have the default value null or empty string based on its type. Now inside this onSubmit function, I'm just trying to print the value of full name. So we can do this, print underscore contact dot name. Now back to the application here. Let me try some random text here, ABC, submit the form. We can't see any output here. So go to view, then debug console. So currently the name property is null. So as per the usual procedure, before doing insert or update operation, we will save the field values inside the corresponding contact object properties. For that we can do this. First of all, we will define a variable form. We have to refer the form that we have created here. For that we can make use of this key that we have passed here. So we just need to do this underscore form key dot current state. From that we just need to call this save function. So while calling this function save, it does nothing inside these contact properties mobile or name. We have to do that manually. So basically this is how it works. When we invoke this save function here, there will be a callback function inside the form text fields. We can define the callback for all of the text fields like this on saved. So basically this is a function with single parameter value. Inside this parameter we will have the current value inside the input field. Now basically inside this callback function we just need to save this field value into the state object contact name property. So first of all we have to call this set state function, and here we can do this underscore contact dot name is equal to val. That's it. Now let me copy this and pasting for mobile here instead of name mobile. So this is what happens. Inside the form submit event, we have called this function save from the form, and hence it will invoke all of the callback function inside the form input text fields here. Inside the callback, we have saved the value into corresponding properties inside the state object contact. And hence with this print statement here, we could see the value inside input name field. Currently we have ABC inside the full name text box. Now let's submit the form. That's it. Here we can see the same inside the debug console. Now let's look how to define validation for this form here. In order to submit this form, this full name text field should not be empty, and there should be 10 or more characters inside this mobile text field. So let's look how we can define or implement validation inside the form controls here. For that we can make use of this validator, and here we have the function with single parameter value. So basically we want to check the length of this value from the text field. If it is equal to 0, then we will print this message, this field is required. Otherwise we will return null, indicating there is no validation error. Now let me copy this same validation rule and pasting here for mobile also. If the value inside this text field, if it is less than 10 characters, then we have to show this message at least 10 characters required. So here we have defined the validation for text fields. Now let's look how we can make use of that. In order to check whether the form as a whole is valid or not, we can have this if statement here, and we will call the function validate from the form. It will return true if validation is successful. Otherwise, you could see validation error message along with invalid text fields. Let me clear this full name here. Now let's try to submit the form. So here we have the validation error message for both. Now let's provide a random name for this full name. Now let's try to submit the form. Still we have one validation error because of this mobile field here. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, submit. That's it. So form as a whole is valid. Now let's look how we can save these field values into the state object. For that, first of all, we are going to create a state object of the type list of contact. List of contact underscore contacts, initialized with an empty array. Now we have to save this contact information inside this list of contacts here. So let's do that inside this on submit event here. Set state function should be called first of all. Inside that we can do this underscore contact dot add function can be called. Into that we have to save this object contact. Inside this contact instance we have already saved or updated values from these fields inside the on-saved events here. Now we have to have a ListView widget to list all of the records inside this list of contacts from top to bottom just below this form here. So instead of container widget, we have to call this function expanded. It will expand the child widgets horizontally. First of all, let's add the child for this widget. We'll start with the card. Now let's apply a margin. Edge insets. So with this function we can apply 4 different margins from all of the 4 sides. 30, 20, 0. Now inside this card as a child element we can add the ListView widget. It will help us to show a list of records from top to bottom by iterating through the list. Inside this function we just need to call this builder function here. For this ListView builder method, mainly we have 2 properties. First of all, we have item builder, which is a function with 2 parameters, context, and then the index. We can elaborate that in a bit. And finally, we have to provide this property item count. So basically inside this widget, we are going to iterate through this list of contacts here, underscore context. That will be done inside this function item builder. With this parameter item count, we have to provide number of items inside the list. So we can do this contacts dot length. Now let's elaborate this function. Before that, let me add a padding for each of the items. Edge insets dot all function can be called. We are going to apply padding of the range 8 from all sides. Inside this function, we are going to return a column widget. Inside every column widget, there should be a property children of the type list of widgets. Inside this column, first of all, we will have this widget list style. With this widget, we can show the data like this. This is how a list style looks like. At the top, we can show the name of the person here. Just below that, we can have the mobile number of the person. Along with that, you could have a leading and a trailing icon like you see here. So here we have the list style. Just below that, I want to show a divider corresponds to a horizontal line. I will set the height as 5. Now let's complete this list style here. First of all, we have to have a leading icon similar to this one here. So leading, and we will set that with this icon. As a first parameter, we can pass the icon account circle. As a second parameter, I will set the color as dark blue. And finally, size of the icon. And then we can provide the top title. Inside this title, I just want to show this widget text. As we have mentioned, inside this function, we are trying to iterate through the list contacts. In order to access the current object, we can make use of this index here. So contacts, and here we have the index. From this, we have to show the name of the person. In here, I want to convert this full name into uppercase. Inside the widget, let me change the color and font weight. So style is equal to text style. Color is equal to dark blue color, then font weight as bold. Before showing rest of the contact details, let's look how this ListView widget looks like. Now let's submit the form. Boom. So here we have the leading icon and here we have the full name of the person. Now just beneath this full name we have to show the mobile number, subtitle, so that we should have this text widget where we want to show the mobile number. Let me copy and paste this here. Instead of name we have mobile. Back to the application, that's it. After the record insertion inside this form submit event, here we have to reset the form. We just need to do this. Just call the function reset. Now let's try to insert a new record here. Submit the form. Boom, that's it. But there is a major mistake that we have made. Did you see that here? Both of these records looks same. Do you know why? We have inserted new records by calling this function add here. Inside that we have passed this contact object instance. So both of these items inside this contacts list are pointing to the same object contact here. Since we point to same object, you could see all of the item inside the list shows same value. In order to avoid this situation, we have to create new instance of contact for each of the record. So here we go. Contact. So here we have the constructor with named parameters. So ID is equal to null, the name that we can access from this object contact.name. Now let's restart the app to clear the existing duplicate records. Let's try whether it is working or not. Submit. Now let's try one more. That's it. So here we have the Flutter application to demonstrate CRUD operations. Inside the app we have two widgets, form and a ListView widget. Inside the form we have two text fields for full name and mobile, also one submit button. We have already implemented validation inside this form. For the time being, we have inserted the contact object into this list of contacts here. Now I'm going to show you how you can implement SQLite CRUD operations inside this Flutter app. As you know, SQLite DB is a SQL DB which is implemented in C programming language. It will be there already installed in any mobile device. Hence, SQLite DB is the most used database in the world. And you must know this, SQLite DB saves data in a single file as a collection of map objects. We will start with this model class here, contact. Since data stored in SQLite DB is a collection of map objects, before saving an object into SQLite DB, we have to convert that into map object. Basically in Dart, you could say this map object is a pair of key value pair like this. For example, you could represent the map object in Dart like this. X is equal to, first of all we have the key which is name, and then we have the value something ABC. Like this you could have any number of key value pair. Mobile. So this is how the Dart representation of a map object. Like I said, before insert operation we have to convert the normal Dart instance into corresponding map object. So let's define a function to do the conversion here. So here we have the function toMap, and from this function we have to return a map. So obviously the map key will be of the type string and the value will be either string or int. So we can say that the key will be of the type dynamic. Now inside this function I'm going to define an object map, and here we are trying to initialize a map object with the same type. So here we have the first key value pair, name is equal to name, mobile which is equal to mobile. Now it is important to use the same key value as that of this property here. Since we use same key value as that of this property here, it would be easy to convert back and forth while retrieving and inserting the record. Now, as part of best practice, I'm going to add few constant strings at the top here so that we can avoid this hard coding of these keys here, and later we can avoid the typo because of them. So here it is, static constant. First of all, we have the table name. I have used this prefix tbl to indicate it is a table name. Contacts. Now let me duplicate this 3 times. Call ID, call name, call mobile. Now let's replace this hard-coded string here with the constant value. So call name, then call mobile. Actually, we have one more property here, ID. Initially it would be null, so we don't have to add that into this map object here. We will do that only if it is not a null value. So if ID is not null, we have to save the value of the key call ID as ID. So this is how we can add a new key value pair into this map object here. Finally, from this function, we just need to return the map. So before passing an object of contact into SQLite DB, we will convert the object into corresponding map object by calling this toMap function here. Now we have to do the reverse operation while retrieving the record from the DB, which is from map object into corresponding contact object. For that, we are going to create a named constructor, which is a special type of constructor in Dart. So this is how we do it. Contact dot from map. As a parameter to this function, we have a map object of this type map. Sorry, we forgot to use this keyword map here. Now let's initialize these class properties from this map object here. ID is equal to, we have to retrieve the value from this key value called ID. Let me duplicate this 2 times. Name, mobile, call mobile. That's it. Now we are going to implement the Flutter CRUD operations with the package SQLite. So first of all, let's add the dependency for the package inside this file here, pubspec.yaml. Inside the file, you could see this section for dependencies. Inside the file, you could see few packages already. For example, we have Flutter SDK here and Cupertino icons here. Now let's add the dependencies for our application here. Make sure that you left 2 spaces before the package name like this. So here is the first package, SQLite, and here we need a space before the version. In case of this package, we are not specific to any version, so we can use any here. Like this, we need one more package called path provider. We are not specific to any version of this package also, so we can provide any here. Now once we save this file, corresponding packages will be added into the application. So you could see this command here, get, for installing these new packages. In order to handle common SQLite operations inside the DB, I'm going to create a new file inside the application. For that, I will create a new folder, utils. Inside that, we will create a new file, database helper. So here we have to define this function, database helper. First of all, I will add few constants here. Database name as contact data.db. Now we need one more constant for database version. I will explain what we meant by this database version. Let's initialize that with 1. For now, here we have a normal class database helper. We want to convert this class into a singleton class, meaning we are going to convert this class into a separate type of class such that we can only create one instance of this class. I will tell you why we need to make this class a singleton class later. For that, first of all, I'm going to create a constructor for this class, actually named constructor, which is a private constructor, something you could name private or something, or you could have just this underscore, which is also a valid name in Dart. So here we have a constructor with the name underscore. I just want to keep it as simple as that, since we are using the constructor just to convert this class into singleton class. So here is the trick to convert this class into a singleton constructor. Static final database helper. Here we are defining a new property instance which is equal to database helper, and from that we are calling this constructor that we have just created above. As you can see here, this property is of the type final and static. In Dart, final properties can only be initialized once. So here we have already initialized this instance while declaring this property here. So by using this instance property, we can make sure that we are not creating more than one instance of this class. I will explain why we are concerned about singleton class later. Here we are going to define a property of the type database, which is defined inside the package SQLite. So inside this auto prediction here, select this first option so that the import statement will be added at the top here. So here we are going to define a property of the type database as underscore database. Using this property, we are going to interact with the SQLite DB. Now let's define a getter. I hope you already know the getter and setter that we used to have in every common programming languages. So here we have to define a getter to just return this database object after connecting to this contact DB file here. So here is the getter database, and from this function we are going to return an object of database. Inside that, first of all, we will check whether we already initialized this property. So we can check that with this if statement here, database. If it is not null, meaning it is already initialized, in that case we will return the same. So during the first call for this getter here, this database property will be initialized, and the subsequent request to this getter here will return the same. Else we have to initialize this property after connecting to this DB here. So this is what we do. Database is equal to, we have a private function for initializing the DB, so init database, and finally we will return the database object. Now let's define this function underscore init database. First of all, I will define a property of the type directory. So select this option to add the import statement at the top, data directory, and we have to call this function get application documents. Inside the auto suggestion you could see the function, and we have to import that from this package path provider that we have added inside the pubspec.yaml file. So select the option, import statement is added here. So basically this function returns the database directory where we save the data. It will be different for different OS. It will be handled by the package path provider. As you can see here, this function returns future directory, which means this function is an asynchronous function. Since this function returns a data type of the type future, we have to wait for this function to complete its operations. Then this function returns a type of directory. So in order to wait for this function to complete its processing, we can add this keyword here, await. If we use this await keyword here, we have to convert this function into an asynchronous function. Now let's define a new string property here, db path. Inside this property we are going to have the database path up to this file here. So for that we just need to join this directory with this database name here. So we can call this function join. As a first parameter we can pass this data directory here, and then we can pass database file name. So in order to make use of this function, we have to import the package here, package path /path.dart. Now to make this connection into the DB, we can call this function open database. As a first parameter, we have to pass the path, db path. As a second parameter, we have to pass this version, which is already there inside this property here. So underscore database version. I will explain the need of this version in a bit. And here we have the function, callback function on create. We will define this function in a bit. So as you can see here, this function returns a type of future database. Since this future is here, we could say this is an asynchronous function. So first of all, we will add this keyword await here. So it will return a type of database. And we just need to return that from this function. So that's it. So we started with this getter here. If this underscore database is already initialized, we will return it as it is. Otherwise, we will return the object after connecting to the DB. Now let's look at this function on create. If you are running this application for the first time after installing the app into the device, there will not be any DB to connect. So we have to create the DB with initial databases. For example, we have to create the DB with a single table contact with these columns that we have mentioned inside this contact model here. We have to create the table contacts with these columns. So that initial schema creation can be done with this callback function on create. So let's define the function underscore on create DB. So here is the function on create DB. For this function, we have two parameters, database as DB and then the version number that we have passed here. This is also an async function. So we have to add this async keyword here. Now let's create the DB. For that, we can make use of this function execute. Let's add the await keyword here. Inside this execute function, we can execute SQL queries for creating the table. For that, I will start with these three single quotes and we have to end the string same way. In between that, we can write the query. When we do this, we can separate the string into multiple lines so that the code will be more readable. So here is the SQL command to create the table, create table. Here we have to provide the name of the table that we have already saved inside this contact model here. Now let's access that here. For that, let's have this dollar pair of curly brace, then contact, TBL contact. We have to import this model class here. So let's add that here, import package, and then the name of the application, which is SQLite CRUD, then model, and inside that we have this file contact dot. And then inside these brackets we have to provide the list of columns. So first of all, we have the primary key or the ID column. So contact dot call ID, which is of the type integer, which is also the primary key for the table. And also we will specify this constraint auto increment. So we don't have to insert value into this column ID. It will be done by the DB itself. It will start from 1 and incremented by 1 upon new record insertion. Okay, now let me copy this and paste in here twice. So this is for name column, which is of the type text. It should not accept null. We have already added the validation inside the form as required. Now finally here we have the mobile column. Let me copy this and paste in here. So here we have the SQL query to create the table contact. So with this function, we will create the initial schema for the DB. Now what is meant by this version here? Actually, this is not a version of the database engine. It is a version for the database itself. For example, if you are using MS SQL, it will be 2014 Express or Enterprise, etc., which is not meant by this version here. This is not the version of SQLite. It is a version for the database itself. So for the first time, we will create the DB physically inside the mobile device, and its version will be 1 as we have given here. In future updates of the application, if you want to change the schema of the application, you just need to do this. You will increment this version to 2, and also you could define a callback function on upgrade like we have mentioned this on create here. Inside that function, inside that you could change the schema through create or alter command. So let's look what we have done here. Since this function init database is of the type async, we have to wait for this function execution before returning this database object here. So we have to add this void keyword here, and hence we have to make this getter into async. If there is an async method and it returns a non-void value, we have to convert that into future return type like this. Now let's implement the CRUD operations insert, update, delete, and retrieve. First of all, we will define the function for insert operation, and we will use that instead of this push function here inside the form submit event, so that we can insert the new record into SQLite DB. So here we have the function insert contact. For this function we have only one parameter, contact. This function will be of the type async. From this function we will return the ID of newly inserted record. So we have to return that like this, future int. First of all, let's call this getter here database, so that we can have the database object. So here it is, database db is equal to, now let's call the getter with the keyword avoid database. For insert operation, we just need to call the SQLite function insert. So we can do this db.insert. There are two types of function provided by the SQLite package, which is the direct function insert and the row insert function. With this row insert function, first of all, we have to provide a SQL query with required parameter values. In this application, we will be calling this direct function insert. As the first parameter, we have to pass the table name that we can access from the constant tbl contact. The value will be passed through this parameter contact. Now before passing this object into this insert function, remember we have to convert that into corresponding map object. We can call the function that we have created, contact to map function can be called. As you can see, this function returns a type future int, and we will return the integer here. So here we have the insert operation. Now let's call this function inside this main dot file here. Now first of all, inside this home page widget, we have to create an instance of this class database helper class. So I will create a state object here, database helper. Click on this auto suggestion to add the corresponding import statement, db helper. You could directly initialize the object here, like database helper instance property can be accessed. Through this parameter instance, we are only creating one instance of the class throughout the application. If we are allowed to make more than one object of this database helper class, there will be as much as database connections initialized into this object here. When there are more connections to a single database, then the SQLite DB will be locked. In order to avoid this situation, we have converted this class into a singleton class with the help of this final state property here. Now let me remove this function increment counter, which was there as part of the default application. So let me remove this. Now let me override a function from the parent widget class here. So override init state function can be called here. Inside the function, first of all, we will call the parent function like super init state function. So this function will be called only once when this widget is added into the application or the widget tree. It is a best practice to move time-consuming initializations into this init state function here. So I want to initialize this state object inside this function because it might take some time for the first time at least. So let's initialize that here. First of all, we have to call this set state function here, and then we could do this db helper is equal to, let me cut this and pasting here. Now we have to call this insert function inside the form submit event here. Now we can remove this push function into the list. We are going to insert the record directly to the database. So let me remove this, void keyword db helper insert contact can be called. Into that we can pass the state object underscore contact. Since we call this avoid function here, we have to add the async keyword here. So that's it. This will insert a new record into the SQLite DB with the form field values here. Before testing this insert operation, let's look how we can retrieve the records from the DB. Create another function inside this database helper class here. Future list of contact. Function name will be fetch contacts. This function is of the type async. Now let me copy this variable from here and paste in here. Let me create another variable of the type list map as contacts. Into this variable we have to retrieve all of the records from the DB. For that we can call this function query, and here we just need to pass the name of the table, so tbl contact. This is a function of the type async, so we have to use this keyword avoid here. So as you can see here, this contacts is of the type list of map. Instead of that, we want to return list of contact. So we just need to convert this map object into contact. So first of all, here we have the return statement. We will check the length of the list contacts dot length. If it is equal to 0, then we just need to return an empty collection or list. Otherwise, we have to convert the array. For that, we can do this. Contacts dot map function can be called. So inside this callback function, we are creating an instance of contact using this named constructor from map. Into that, we just need to pass this map here. So this will be corresponding to the map here, and we have created a contact object from the map. After all, we have to call this function to list. So with this map function, we can iterate through this collection and we can convert each of the map object in it. So we have defined the function. Now let's call that inside this main.dart file here. We are creating a new function, refresh contact list, which is of the type async. Inside that, we have created this variable of the type list of contact, and we have to call the async function. So here we have added this keyword avoid underscore db helper fetch contacts can be called. Now let's update this state object here underscore contacts. So first of all, we have to call the set state function. Inside that, we could do this contacts is equal to x. It is better to call this refresh contact list inside this init state function here. So here we have called the function. Now let's try the insert operation. Before that, we have to restart this application because this init state function will be called once for this home page widget, which is already called for this when it started. So in order to reflect the new changes inside this function, we have to restart the application. Here we have something went wrong, missing plugin exception. In order to see the complete error message, go to view, then open debug console. You must thoroughly check this pubspec.yaml file here. We need 2 space here and then 1 space before the version. We have done everything properly here. In these cases, stop the execution here. Now let's try to reopen this window here. For that, you can use this shortcut Ctrl+Shift+P, then reload window. So here we have reloaded the Visual Studio. Let's try to run this application inside the emulator. For that, press F5, select Dart and Flutter. Okay, now the application looks fine. So when you have an error and you are confident about your project or source code that you have written, then try to reopen the VS Code editor. Not all time we are wrong, sometimes the editor might be wrong. Now back to the application, let's try to insert a new record. Submit the form. Sorry, we forgot to call the function refresh list. So we have to call this function here, underscore refresh contact list. Now let's try to insert a new record. Now after this insert operation, we should also see the previously inserted record inside this ListView widget here. Submit the form. Boom. So far we have implemented insert and retrieve operation with the help of SQLite. Now let's try to update an existing record. For that, first of all, user want to select a record for update operation by tapping any of these contact records here. And then corresponding record should be populated inside these text fields for update operation. So let's look how we can do that. Here we have shown a single contact information with this list style widget. Into this widget, let's wire up a new function for onTap event. Okay, so here is the function. So first of all, inside the function, we are going to update this state object underscore contact. For that, we will call this function set state. Inside that, we could do this contact is equal to, we can access the current object from this list with the index that we have inside this function here, item builder. So here is the parameter index. Let's pass that here, index. Now along with that, we have to populate these input fields here with the corresponding record details. For that, first of all, we have to assign text editing control for these input fields here. So let's add that at the top. Final control name. So this is for the full name control is equal to text editing controller. Now let me duplicate this, and this is for mobile. Now we have to assign these controllers into corresponding input fields. So we can do this. Controller is equal to name controller. Now let's do the same for this mobile also. Controller is equal to mobile controller. Now in order to update the value inside these text fields, we could do this. So we are looking for the onTap event here. Control name dot text is equal to, we can set the corresponding full name here, name. Now let me duplicate this, mobile control mobile. Okay, back to the application. Let's try that here. That's it. Selected record details will be populated into these text fields here. Now for the update operation, user can make the required changes and finally submit the form. So inside this form submit event, we have already implemented insert operation. Now we have to do update operation also. For that, first of all, we will check whether the ID value is null or not. If the ID from this contact object is null, we can say we have an insert operation. Otherwise, we can go for the update operation. So let's define a function for update operation here. For that, I will just copy this insert function and pasting here update contact. Instead of insert operation, we have to call this update function. As a first parameter, we have to pass the name of the table and the object containing the updated value. So if we execute this, all of the records will be updated with this object. Instead of that, we just need to update the selected record. For that, we can do this var contact ID is equal to question mark. Then as a next parameter, we can have this var x. So here we have to pass a value for this place here, which is contact.id. So this update operation will be done where the contact ID is equal to the given ID here. Okay, now back to the submit event here. We can do this avoid db helper update contact can be called. Into the function, we just need to pass this state object contact. So that will be enough for the update operation. Now let's try to update this record here. So I will just update this mobile number ending in 2 zeros. Submit the form. That's it. So here we have updated the corresponding record, but you see this form reset operation is not working with this call here. It is because of changing values inside the text fields through controller. So we have to do that separately. So I will just define a new function here, reset form, and I will call this function here reset form. And first of all, we have to call this setState function. And first of all, we have to call the default function from the form that we can access from this form key. So form key dot current state dot reset function can be called. Now we have to separately clear these input controls. Control name dot clear function can be called. Let's duplicate that here. Control for mobile. Let's update the contact ID as null so that after the form reset operation, the form will be ready for the insert operation, not for the update operation. So that's all about the reset operation. Now let's try to update this record here. 14 is replaced with 00. Submit the record. So here we have successfully implemented update operation also. Now finally we have delete operation. Like this user circle icon, we can have one icon for delete operation also at the end. So let's add that inside this list tile here. We can do that with this trailing widget. We want to show an icon button, so we can have this widget. So first of all, we have to provide an icon here. So icon widget can be used. Inside that we can pass the icon icons dot delete sweep. Let's change the color of this icon, so dark blue color. Now let's complete this on pressed event here. We will have a callback function of the type async. Now if you check the application, you could already see the icon here for delete operation. Now when we click on this icon, we have to delete the corresponding record. So we can do this. First of all, let's define the corresponding function like we have done for other CRUD operations. For delete operation, I will copy this function for update operation. Delete contact. Into the function, we just need to pass the ID. So int ID. Instead of update function, we can call this delete function here. We don't have to pass this object here. Here we have the condition to identify the record to be deleted. In place of this question mark here, we have to use the ID. So here we have the ID parameter. So this will delete the corresponding record with the given ID. Now let's call this function inside this on pressed event here. So avoid db helper dot delete contact function can be called. Into that we have to pass the ID of the record that can be accessed from the list contacts index. So here we have the corresponding record and let's pass the ID. So after the delete operation, let's reset the form and then reset the list of records by calling this function refresh contact list. Let's try to delete this record. Boom, that's it. If you want to see the original SQLite DB for this application here, for the contact DB, I'll be posting a new article or a video on the topic. You could check that inside the video description, where I have already given the articles for this same topic. You can grab code from there as well. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. And for more awesome videos like this, please be subscribed to this channel CodAffection. Have a nice day. Bye.